follow up with a YouTube from beginning to end. It'll be about 20 minutes maximum. And the topic, hello, Phoebe. Thank you for joining me. The topic this week is how do we research these days? I wanted to take my listeners and viewers through my own personal story of my interactions with all these social media sites and how they bounced up against some of the tools I learned as a liberal arts student in a college. Okay, so that's all very white, colonizer based education and indoctrination. That's my starting point. I am a Seven Sisters girl. I went to Mount Holyoke College. I went there because it had a very strong science curriculum for women, and because a at the time the head of the American Chemical Society was a graduate from my college. I was a biochemistry major, and it was a liberal arts school, which meant that everybody was required to do a certain amount of how do you ask a question and find answers to it. My college education doing that was really, really complicated by institutional racism, sexism, and classism. That is a whole can of worms. Suffice to say that I had a very strong undergraduate education between going to private schools off and on throughout my K through 12 years and public education where I had to really pay attention to who else was in the space. I got an excellent education and it made me a lifelong learner. I get very enthusiastic, which is why I'm on this platform and over at YouTube trying to edutain. Edutaining for me is showing you things that you may not figure out on your own and giving you shortcuts. Okay, my academic background meant that I was trained to be pretty strong as a researcher, and I was doing what now gets called interdisciplinary studies way back in 1978 or so. I was asking the question way back then, hmm, if I've been interested in a subject called cultural anthropology, which is looking at how different cultures grow us humans, I think that's probably a good way to say it. What can I see relating to how Black women are viewed by their doctors when their doctors are white men? Okay, so I tackled that was my original question as a student trying to figure out if I wanted to do honors level work in college, and that would require a lot of research. I ended up doing it interdisciplinary because you couldn't really squeeze that topic into one place. It was a little bit cultural anthropology, it was a little bit sociology, because I was looking specifically at a particular problem back then that Black women were just learning about. This was sickle cell trait back in the late 70s. It had a little bit of biochemistry in it, it had a whole bunch of history and a whole bunch of research. All right, fast forward to the age we are in, which is social media. So, my clash with social media, which started with Facebook, and we all, I hope, will be able to find for at least a while longer the story of Mark Zuckerberg and how he took a project of essentially rating women's faces in a very juvenile way and turned it into this multi-billion-dollar business. Along the way, two things happened for me. So I was right along with other people using social media, and I was writing essays a lot on Facebook. And I had at the time a daughter in her late 30s, and she was pregnant with my second grandchild. And she was out of the country, pregnant with my second grandchild, on her way to India to an amazing wedding of a friend of the family's. And they were stopping on their way in Dubai. And I had some comment about them stopping in Dubai because it's such a classist system where you don't see the poverty at all. And I compared in an essay what I was witnessing my daughter do with what I imagined my mother had been doing and had felt when I was pregnant with my second child and going to the very Catholic, very white wedding in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, of my college roommate. Imagining that my mother would have been like, "Are you out of your mind? Don't you have any sort of personal morals?" type of a thing. Well, my daughter was out of the country when I did this. Would you believe that in the world of social media back then, and this is all happening, oh my goodness, 12, 10 or 12 years ago, somebody tattled on me. One of her friends contacted her in her travels, and she started a war on my wall. Okay, that was the second thing I learned about social media, that you could have these things that were very public and you had to really be clear on where you were posting. Are you posting a private message or are you posting on your wall? So on my wall, I began a back and forth with my daughter, but it didn't go too far because she got attacking, and I was new enough to Facebook to check in with some of my friends and say, what is going on? And how do I get out of this? And they said, just don't respond. Just let it die. And I did. But I also quit Facebook because I said, this is too complicated for me. Okay. Years later, I went back for take two. Take two on Facebook was when my let's see, my daughter was pregnant with my second child. Okay, so I went back on Facebook some ways along the way to start to stalk my grandchildren so I could know what was going on with their swimming meets, I think, and some of their activities. Anyway, I am minding my own business, looking at something that is on a friend's wall. She was newly graduated from law school. She was doing her first big gig. She was in New York City, and she was appalled by what she was seeing in family law. She was not prepared for, essentially, summary, the men always get anything that they want, whether it's that they don't want to have any child support or they want sole custody of the kids, or, they always get what they wanted. And she was kind of shocked by that. So I was commenting again on the wall, this strange place. Well, of course, that's a reflection of the patriarchy. It always eats its own children. That's what I wanted to say. Now, as I was going to post that on the wall, I went to go over from Facebook to Google back then. That's our monopoly place. There aren't any other real competitors to Google. I went over to Google to start to look for a painting, a famous painting, and it's Kronos eating his children. It's a Goya painting. And all of a sudden, Facebook offers me, well, do you want this one? And what it is offering me is a photograph from my daughter's Facebook page that are my own grandchildren standing in front of a exhibit at the Museum of Science that is a dental exhibit with a big huge open mouth, and they're standing in front of it with these big toothbrushes looking coward like they're afraid. Okay, that creeped me out significantly. It was offering me, in response to me writing the phrase eats its own children, a visual image from my own family algorithmic connections. Holy moly, that was weird and creepy. And I checked back at the day with a friend who knew the most geeky engineering about hardware and software and all of this. I said, can they actually read from what I've printed and have it go that fast through all of the things that are available on that social media site and regurgitate that to me? And they told me, yeah, they could. So that was the second time I left Facebook. I said, this is too strange for me. Each time I left Facebook, I want to say, it took me a significant amount of work to actually get off. It kept saying, would you like to suspend your account for 3 months? No, I would like to exit. Would you like to, are you sure you won't want to suspend your account? No, I would like to exit. And I know that that second time, what I ended up doing was essentially putting, oh, that's the other thing, my password wouldn't work. The password that I had just wouldn't let me do the next step to exit my subscription to Facebook. Okay, so what I did was I set an alarm and I kept going every hour because I knew what my password was and it wouldn't work. And I kept going and I kept going. And I will never forget this. At 2 in the morning, it finally went through and exited me. Now, when Facebook exited you back then, as is true now for Instagram, and I don't know the other sites because I have never been on them, it punishes you by not allowing you to see what anybody else is posting on those sites. Okay, so I am under a punishment from Facebook. And I remain under that punishment because when back when I started to do my exodus towards Panama, I was told by a reliable source, bullshit, that I could not do Panama without being a part of the social media networking group that's on Facebook. So I tried to get back on Facebook. Ooh, they are slick. Can I tell you, Facebook took all my data again, asked me to turn my head this way, took all these pictures, right? I hadn't had this happen before. Turn my head this way, took all these pictures. Then it declared me a bot and that I was not a human. so, so with all my facial metrics, uh, it is impossible to get back, which is probably God, spirit, God, us, the holy secularism taking care of me at this moment in time. And it has not been true that I cannot do what I need to do without having access to Facebook. I wish I could explain that to more people because it really is time to spread this Exodus strategy. All right, that's the social media piece that was big. During COVID, I hit mild celebrity status by saying something provocative, having a TikTok account, and having everybody focus over there in a viral kind of a way for a brief and shining moment. And that meant that I suddenly had from 0 to 60,000 followers at TikTok. I say that because my experience of being at TikTok before it became ethically impossible for me to continue, which was right when Trump was coming in and doing all that take it away, let it stay, take it away, let it stay, playing around, that I realized I had to exit that platform too. Before that, I recognized that it was a great opportunity for me to see how big a nothing platforms like TikTok have become. When I joined because I was bored during the pandemic and because my then president, Donald Trump, told me not to join TikTok, so I did. And it was, I remind everyone, a movement platform. It was Byte Dance, BYTE dance originally, which meant there were a whole bunch of cool things you could do. And I'm a dancer. You could duet with people and they could dance and you could dance the dance they were dancing. And then you could have 5 people dancing the same dance. It was really kind of fun. And I also came in November of that year, and that was Indigenous Peoples Month. So I was in TikTok right as a lot of the indigenous TikTok things were going wild and crazy and creative and proud. So TikTok was a fun place for the first year or so I was there. And then it got to be dumber and dumber and pushed more and more towards what I'm calling creating paywalls. Okay, so that's the other thing that social media is doing. It's driving people to believe they can all become famous influencers, make a whole bunch of money, and have, I guess it's called a passive stream of income if you don't mind doing what I'm doing now, being a talking head. However, what I noticed on TikTok was there were a whole bunch of shady things going on. There was this app that was taking women's clothes off that had to be warned about. I knew that even though they had a agreement of nobody under 13, I had seen under 13-year-olds with accounts on TikTok, and I just left eventually. I left it open and tried to steer other people off. Okay, that brings us to what is happening now when I need to find something I'm interested in. Google has stopped being anything like a search engine. They announced it officially on May 1st. You can try to search that and figure that out yourself. But essentially, they're not even going to fake to you that they're giving you the information that you've asked for. They're going to suggest things to you that they believe you might need. And that's all based on the data mining that they have done on your poor little brain and your psyche and your anxieties. Because I remind you that we had this awful scandal of Cambridge Analytica and recognize that the engines out there that are supposedly data mining are also steering us towards negative outcomes because that's what sells more product. And that often is how you shape and manipulate people. All right. Back in the day, I could go online and ask a question like I could put in words endometriosis in Black women, 1998 to, and give that range. And I would get information on articles that had been written about that topic. I used to be able to do that through going to Google. That's what a search would give me. Way back in the day when Google became a verb. Have you Googled yourself, Mom? You know, my daughter said to me, I Googled you, and there's 14 references to you. Back in that day, it seemed that the internet would do a search and would pull out everything that had those words. Now, I know that I used to be able to also put words inside of quotes, and then it would only give me the words, a research response that were the words inside that quote. The next thing that started to happen, and I could do that on Google, and I could do that through the various search engines. Like, I'm not an expert here, so I'm not going to get all the terminology right. But there are ways you access your internet through Bing or through DuckDuckGo or through Firefox or through a Chrome, I think. Okay, so those I think are all the same kind of level, and then you pick which one you want to be using regularly. Some of them are open source and some of them are not. I do know that Google is now like the base for pretty much everything. It is being sued as a monopoly. You cannot get around it. And yet it will not give us the search information anymore. It will suggest, and it used to be pretty subtle, but it's pretty out there now. It will suggest what it thinks you might want to be interested in. I'm going to walk us through an example. It is an example that had to do with sex, so God alone knows if YouTube will allow this to go forward. But I'm trying to think if I can get another example that won't be quite so. Okay, let me try another example. All right. Back in the day, a woman named Adriana Smith, a black nurse, had a stroke when she was 9 weeks pregnant with a baby, was in Atlanta, Georgia, where they have very strict anti abortion laws, and was forced to carry that baby, although her stroke left her brain dead, for another 5.5 months, I think it was. When I was trying to get an update on what was happening after the baby had been delivered by cesarean section at 1.5 pounds, okay, baby named Chance, I tried to follow what was happening with the baby. And every time I would Google, like, okay, Google or search straight words, Adriana Smith update, I would get all these strange answers. And most impressively different than what I asked for is what is starting to appear as a summary. So at the beginning of anything I would search, AI would offer me a summary of whatever the topic was and some gentle nudges in directions, often of advertisements, etc. At the bottom of every little square of the AI, you will see what the AI used to give you that answer. This is the piece I want to say out loud and shouting. Every time you choose that, those little people that Google that the AI actually summed up or stole from, they lose the traffic that would come to their website. They get less and less likes. They start to shrink. So that's where we are right now, is that the AI that is finding those answers for you and is making you feel like, oh, this is great. I've got a summary. It's also shaping where it's sending you. It is essentially stealing from those smaller sites. And often these days, it's not accurately citing anything. So if you have nothing there, if you don't have any quotations, that is a problem. And that's happening more and more with the AI assisted search engines. So what am I doing? I'm using several places. I researched Wikipedia, and Wikipedia has been democratic friendly enough for me to continue to use it when I am trying to start a search and then to go to where it tells me to go next and follow those uh, notations. The other source is archive.org, which also was very democratic but has had a couple of big problems. One was it lost a lot of data through some kind of a hacking leak. It lost individuals' data, but it's still the place which, like the Library of Congress, used to have a copy of every book. Archive.org is truly trying to get copies of every data point out there. I know how crazy that is, but I appreciate people with a good intention. Let's see if there's anything else I want to say right now as we are coming up to 7:25 officially, and I'm going to close on out. Search engine wise and AI wise, I try to stay American. On good recommendation from a very active 12-year-old, I began to use Perplexity, which has a smaller CO2 database footprint than the others, but it's not giving me the best answers, the clearest answers, and it is also going to be under a paywall soon. So I'm continuing to use DeepSeek. And if the Chinese get some information on me because I'm using DeepSeek, well, I guess I am going to deal with that, because when I have compared notes, that is still where I get the most accurate information with a good, detailed, and specific search prompt. Okay, folks, that's it for now. We're on our own pretty soon because we know that all of the legacy media has been gobbled up. So pay attention and do your best to stay informed. Goodbye.